Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I have Reece with us this week. I can't wait for him to share with you what he does, who he is, and all that good stuff. With all that said, Reece, take a second to say hello to the audience.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reece. I'm the founder and CEO of Mirrortrip, and Tony was kind enough to invite me here today. And yeah, looking forward to the chat.
All right, let's dive right into it. So, kick us off with a one-word open, Reece.
Intrigued.
Intrigued. I like it.
Intrigued.
And let's dive deep into your business. So, if you could tell us, that way people are gonna. I want people to go from not knowing, they have no idea what you do right now,
Mhm.
and in the next 3 to 5 minutes, I want them to have a really good high-level overview of what you do and all
Sure.
that good stuff. So, please tell us what you do.
So I founded a company called Mirrortrip, and it's essentially a type of car sharing, a new type of car sharing. We call it ride switching. So that all sounds quite modern and innovative, I guess. But what it does solve is a more traditional problem, predominantly one-way intercity car rentals. And these types of things, when you pick a car up in one city and drop it off in another, historically speaking, and even still currently, a lot of rental companies will charge you what's called a one-way drop-off fee, and it can be quite expensive. And depending on the route, it might not even be there. But a lot of the routes, especially when you're dropping off in a different country or a little further away, it's not uncommon to be charged, several $100s on top of your trip for the privilege of being able to drop off in another city. And really, the reason for that is covering out of pocket costs that the rental companies face. So, if the car's out of state or out of province for too long, it might have to be re-registered. Or if there's just a pileup of too many cars going in one direction, they'll have to get the cars back eventually. So they'd have to hire a tow truck or these sorts of things, which can be expensive. So our platform solves this by matching people driving in opposite directions. So, for example, if you wanted to drive from LA to Seattle, you pick up in LA, let's say at Hertz Rent a Car, and drop off in Hertz in Seattle. And our platform will match you with someone wanting to do the same trip, but in the opposite direction. So it will look for complementary parameters. For example, the day that you're dropping off on versus the other person's pickup time. And if those are roughly adjacent and you're traveling in the opposite direction, then our platform will match you together. And the deals we have in place with rental companies are what allow us to eliminate drop-off fees there. So that's how the platform works. At the moment, we have a pilot in Western Canada, in Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton. And we're working with Hertz on this at the moment. So that's more or less Mirrortrip in a nutshell.
That's really awesome. Um, when you were, what was that aha moment? Like, how did you come up with this idea? Because this is really, in depth and it's really detail. It's something that people never think about, or it's definitely a pain point, and we all experience that. So, how did you come up with the idea, Reece?
Yeah, I was on a road trip. I was driving, so it was my European summer vacation of 2016, and I drove about 3,000 miles on that trip in a rental car. And I'd done these sorts of trips before, the Pacific Northwest and that type of thing, and organizing arbitrary loops. We're just finding ways to sort of eliminate the drop-off fees, knowing that they were there. And we did the same thing in Europe. We traveled south of Spain and south of France as well too. And ideally, we would have just picked up at Paris and headed down the coast and stopped at a new beach every day, and then dropped off at the bottom of Spain there in Granada or Madrid or something, and flown back home, and that would have been great. But it was about, I think we looked at it, it was about €1,500 drop-off fee on top of the regular in order to do that. So that was a bit discouraging. So we ended up just doing a loop in France and a loop in Spain, and then flew between the two cities. So it was on the home stretch, literally, sort of mile number 3,000. And yeah, I had the eureka sort of moment on the way back into Seville there. And, the first thing you do when you start to have these ideas, why hasn't someone done this before? How could this be done? Why would rental car companies even let me operate in this fashion with them? So these were the sort of ideas that were floating around in my head. But the very first instance, I was, of course, Googling it is where you start off. And I was really sort of excited to see the first result was a blog article verifying the problem. And yeah, you might hire a transport company to drive the vehicle back for, and all these different possible solutions. Then at the bottom were about 200 or 300 comments of people saying, yeah, I've had this problem as well too. and even trying to solve the problem in an ad hoc manner in the comments section of the blog, talking to each other, saying, "Hey, I'm going here on this particular date. Is someone available to help relocate a car for me?" So yeah, it sort of gave me some validation there, and uh, my colleagues, we work at we own and operate an agency in Vancouver. So I came back and pitched the idea to them, and they were very receptive. So yeah, we went from there basically.
That's really cool. What about for moving trucks? Have you thought about that idea, like U-Haul or other moving?
Yeah, and that's come up a lot because that's a pretty common scenario. I mean, like any B2B deal, closing these deals takes a decent amount of time, and really we're just looking to, as we mentioned, take small steps and prove out the concept incrementally as we go. But it's certainly on our horizon. One of the main reasons we were interested in this was the whole first mover advantage type of thing, and we were able to formulate that into a global PCT software patent as well too. So I mean, it applies to vehicles in any shape or form, and yeah, certainly moving vehicles will be one thing we'll be looking at in the future for sure.
That's really cool. I mean, the whole thing is a really neat idea. I mean, I'm fascinated. I know when we met on TechCrunch, that when you first told me about exactly what it is you do, I'm like, oh man, this is really cool. So, with that said, let's dive into wins. So, can you share with our audience a recent win that you had, and also what you learned from it, so we could be right there with you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of them was just the main deal that we needed to formulate with this. I mean, so we were a little naive heading into this in the first place. Lots of technical experience in terms of building products and that type of thing, and ultimately not a ton in terms of the specific area of subject matter knowledge that we needed, which was the travel and rental industry, ironically. So I mean, I started solving it from a technical perspective, and when I first looked at the problem, I was looking at APIs in terms of companies. You know, if you might imagine how Expedia or Hotwire might work, how can they plug into all of these different rental companies and be able to book trips with them? So I started looking at it from that perspective and found out the companies that were powering those APIs behind those types of systems, and just looked for technical feasibility. So I tried to approach the problem with a very sort of black and white technical approach to it, and did the research on the APIs. And sure enough, these companies existed, and sure enough, they did the types of things that I needed them to do. So on paper, technically, it was all there. So I just tapped away and started building stuff. Um, and then we hooked in with the API companies and that sort of thing. And our idea in the first place, our sort of first innovation, if you will, why would a rental car company let us do this with their vehicles in the first place? Our first solution to that was that you can sign a driver onto a rental contract anywhere else. So, giving my initial example of Seattle, Los Angeles to Seattle, if you met the other person in Seattle, you could sign them onto the contract as a second driver, just the same you might with your wife or partner. If you were on a road trip and you got sick of driving and you wanted to share the load a little bit with someone you were traveling with, you can sign them onto the rental agreement, and then that's completely legit, and it operates within the confines of what they do already. So they wouldn't have to make any concessions for us. So with that in mind, that initial sort of naive concept, as well as the perceived technical feasibility, we just dove in and did it and started hacking away for about a year or so. And then approaching a release date, the API vendor that integrates you with all these rental companies said, "Oh yeah, by the way, you've got to have a signed agreement with every single rental company you want to go with. I mean, we've got the APIs, but I mean, you've still got to sign the deals with all these companies." So that was really, that opened a segue into a completely different thing, and that was the real world, of course. To which the rental companies were really quick to point out that there could be a whole bunch of indemnity if you're signing someone onto the same contract. If it's someone you know and trust, like a spouse or partner or friend, yeah, great. But if it's a complete stranger, what if they used a fake ID or something like that and their insurance doesn't work, or this sort of thing? I mean, you could really be opening yourself up to a can of worms. So long story short, the win we got out of that was the deal we formulated in the end. We Hertz took a lot of interest in our model right from the get go. I mean, so we spoke to executive C-suite levels and all of the major rental companies, and particularly they were very interested. So that was a big win for us, and they helped us innovate a safer model in terms of reducing indemnity as well too for the other drivers. That's not a factor anymore. So that was really probably the biggest thing we've accomplished to date, I think, and that's essentially what allowed us to launch in the real world.
That's really great. Let's talk about failure. So, what does the word failure mean to you, Reese? I know it has many different meanings to a lot of people, and there's no
Yeah,
right or wrong. But what does failure mean to you? And share with us real quickly a recent failure that you had.
yeah, it's a funny one. I mean, to me, it's a bit of a cliche. It does present an opportunity at the same time, and really, I think that's how you learn. Essentially, myself personally, my father sort of drummed it into me. I mean, you don't fail until you give up, right? So, I mean, really, it's just an iterative thing and something that's to be expected. I think, I mean, I could even, to not get long-winded about it, just to incorporate what I already told you about that whole topsy-turvy process of figuring out how to actually launch. And yeah, I mean, one particular failure was just that our initial concept was completely flawed, you know. We thought we'd solved a great idea. We were just going to fly under the radar and launch in sort of 20,000 locations across North America overnight. And by the time the rental car companies cottoned on to what we were doing, we would have enough bargaining power to sort of negotiate something a little bit more with a little bit more longevity. But yeah, so that was a failure, not realizing that. But I mean, it opened up new opportunities, and in that case, we were introduced to proper account executives who were motivated to work with us and more willing to innovate in realistic ways. So yeah, that's really my opinion of it all.
Awesome. From your experience, if you could give that entrepreneur listening to this right now, that founder that's got the idea, they had the aha moment, if you could give them one advice as they're
Mhm.
listening to this, what's the one piece of advice you could give that listener?
If you're like me, a technical background, a computer science background, technical founder, one area it's really easy to get tripped up is, I mean, technology is your hero at that stage, and learning how to, which is great if you love building things. I kind of think of myself a little bit like if you ever saw the show, the kids show, Fraggle Rock, those dozers that just go around and build things for the sake of it. That's me. I just love building stuff. But if ultimately, if you want to see some success out of what you do, I think you need to learn how to make the customer the center of that, and figuring out what people really want. So the fallacy of the whole build it and there will come model. So to me, I think really focusing on capturing people's mindset rather than focusing on what you're interested in. Of course, they need to intersect at some level, but I think really just learning how to make things as relatable to people as possible, as early on as possible. So continuing that mindset of the customer centric build model as early as possible, and trying to incorporate that into everything that you do.
Excellent. If you could go back in time and if you came across yourself when you were 21 years old, what would you give that? What would you give your 21-year-old self? What advice would you give yourself?
That's a tough one as well too. I'd like to think that I have zero regrets. I probably wasn't as focused as I could or should have been in my 20s. But at the same time, I'm not sure if I would have wanted that either. It was a good. It served its purpose for what it needed to do in my life then, and that was a different time. I think my advice, and this is what I inevitably did anyway, was just to experience as many things as possible. I mean, there are some superstar 20-year-old entrepreneurs out there that will invariably launch very successful companies, but I think really, even if you don't, if you keep trying things and, like me, wear your heart on your sleeve and just keep exposing yourself to new things, trying new things. If you're not pushing that comfort zone, then you're not growing in many ways. So I think that would be something universal I might tell myself, and then that would have benefited me.
Awesome. And also, is there a certain question that I should have asked you that I didn't? And if you could share that with us. Hey, Tony, I wish you would have asked me this, and here's my answer to it. What would that be?
Oh, sure. Well, I was kind of thinking about this actually on a different note, but I guess it could apply. We met at that TechCrunch meetup, which was focused around artificial intelligence and that sort of thing. And I'm surprised that a lot more people don't ask me this question: is how does AI relate to your model? Is it just going to crush your entire business model? These cars can just drive themselves back home without anyone in them. Uh, isn't that going to completely end Mirrortrip and that type of thing? So, I mean, I actually realized this probably about a month or two after we filed for our patent. I was like, oh no, I've made a huge mistake. But the more I thought about it, actually, I think it'll be more of a positive thing for us for a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, like we've seen in the virtual meetup, I mean, actual practical use of level 5 AI is probably quite some time off for now. So, I mean, there's that. And there's lots of posturing about the technology and what it'll be able to do. But if you focus on the simpler things, I think, in terms of the legal aspects of it, I mean, how long will it be before cars can drive unattended interstate or internationally? For example, probably that's either not going to happen at all or not for a long time at least anyway. And then even on the simpler things, I mean, there's still wear and tear, fuel, mechanical depreciation, all this type of stuff that's associated with a car driving a long distance and someone not being in it. And then ultimately at the end of that, you get to just kick your feet up on that European summer vacation and then sort of gaze out the window rather than being in a 7-lane roundabout in the south of Spain and wondering if the street is turning into a footpath or not, and have the car figure that out for you. There's all those positive things. I think one criticism of a car sharing model in general is it really tends to appeal to the middle class as well too, and in terms of underserving people that are a little bit more financially transient, people that don't have credit cards or maybe even necessarily a driver's license, or might have, accessibility issues in terms of being hearing or vision impaired and these sorts of things. So I think really it could help democratize car sharing in a massive, massive way. I mean, if you're worried about being able to get insurance, the fact that if you have a car with a perfect driving record, really that's going to lend itself to um, uh, representing a larger group of people in the future, I think. So it's one question that I'm surprised people don't ask me more, but I think at the same time, it'll have really positive outcomes.
Makes sense. So that's really cool. How could our listeners find out more information about you?
I'm on LinkedIn. So yeah, all my stuff's on there as well too, as we have a blog on a website. Yeah, those are our main outlets of communication on social as well too. We're always posting about things that we're on there. So we're on Facebook, Insta, Twitter, that sort of stuff as well too. So yeah, lots of ways to get in contact with us, or just drop us a line through the website www.mirrortrip.com. It's all there. So all of our social links and that type of stuff. And yeah, always happy to have a conversation about this or other related areas. So yeah,
Good stuff. And sign us off with the one word close, Reece. And tell us why, by the way. Tell us why.
one word close. Okay. Um,
We started with intrigued,
I
right?
started with intrigued. I know I started with intrigued. So I'm just trying to wrap this up. I think intrigued and excited, they go hand in hand. So I'm going to finish off with excited, and I'm going to say why, because if you're excited about what it is that you're doing, it's going to lead to positive outcomes, higher levels of energy, higher levels of consideration and thought. So yeah, intrigued and excited.
Awesome. You certainly got me excited because you're so on point with that. If you're excited about something, you're excited about what you're doing, you could transfer that in your marketing and your energy and your presentation and your conversation and everything. So I really appreciate that. And thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on this show and giving us an insight to what you've created and what you've launched. And it's super exciting. Looking forward to having you back on here soon to check on your progress.
Thanks again, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Of course.